This video contains major spoilers for the entirety of Donkey Kong Bananza. Watch at your own risk. You guys must have been dying to hear my thoughts on all of this. This video will make a few tiny callbacks to my pre-release DK Bananza Theories video, but you do not need to watch it. This is basically its own thing. This video was recorded on October 31st, and depending on future information, it may become outdated. So in my theory video, Chumchucker Charlie explained how he thinks Nintendo doesn't care about lore, and neither should we. And while some people are doubling down on that after Bananza, I think that's entirely wrong, and that the game makes it abundantly clear that Nintendo does care, so I'm starting this video with a brief Donkey Kong timeline to prove it. In the form of a song.
There's Rambi's blanket, lines from Cranky, empty arcade cabinet, arcade country ladies dressed in the arcade palette.
In this 8-bit barrel, 8-bit Adams, 8-bit Kong.
Sign for Lady and the Kong and Arcade 81. Then there's all the other games that acknowledge that this game transpired.
64 as the arcade.
And playing it's required. We could go on and on and on.
But we've shown off quite a lot.
DKC's opening segues into the next spot.
Cranky's records in New Donk Nostalgia Country and Minecraft.
While Souls of Naughty, Winky, Singer, Army, Old Tire, and Unguard.
When old King K. Rool appears, he takes note that you are here.
He'd not do this, he'd say Hoarder! Except DK was not his acquaintance.
Twitter fossil, Glimmer fossil, but no one remembers fossil. Ramble Country. Also, literally everything about Diddy and Dixie on the racing layer.
Fossils of banana birds, Barbo's Chaos, K-Rool's wife. That last one's probably still a joke, but it was cool and spite. K-Rool's propeller pack returns and it's modeled after Chaos.
Quizone dressed up just like Swanky.
Wish's name was Swanky Tongue. Lights just like the old arena, you the leader of the bunch. Crystal coconuts are mentioned, and the oranges that go boom.
Though I suppose a lot of the character-related fossils don't necessarily prove anything, since they'd probably all be from long before any of these games took place, and are just the same species as the characters we've seen before. But it does still show that they're considering the continuity of these characters and species from previous games.
Whoa guys, it's famous Irish YouTuber Sean D. Walsh, here to help out!
Hello.
Anyway, I agree that most fossils don't mean anything. It doesn't make sense for 8-bit barrels to be trapped in fossils, that just doesn't work. But I don't think that means fossils should be ignored entirely. Just not taken literally. In the case of Banana Birds, Chaos, Professor Chops, and the CRT TV fossil specifically, their descriptions reference past events. Speaking of Chops in the CRT, they imply that Donkey Kong Country Returns happened. On the map screen, there's even a cameo of DK Island that notably lacks the mountaintops of Gorilla Glacier, instead having the volcano like Returns. The giant DK head is back, which is potentially a retcon, or the head has merely been rebuilt since Tropical Freeze. Since writing the script, the DK Island plus Emerald Rush DLC has been released, which shows off a tiny condensed representation of the island. It's chock full of different references, including several to DKC Returns, and here's a personal headcanon, I do think the DK head was rebuilt. Unlike past appearances, the stone material the head is made of is different than the stone of the volcano. I could imagine that maybe they carved into a big cliffside sometime after the original head was destroyed, as you can see in this art I created to illustrate my idea.
And of course, Bananza hits us with the big reveal that the Kremlin crew has been trapped underground for ages. At least long enough for K. Rool to formally announce that he's back, and for the Fractones in the Forbidden Lair to say that he went through there long ago. After he commanded his army to jump down that final sinkhole leading to the planet core, the Banandium root grabbed King K. Rool with one of its golden root tendrils, and he plugged the hole with his girthy gator glutes, putting both him and the root into a deep sleep, and stopping new golden roots from popping up all over the underground world for some time, according to the Radiance Layer's Snake Elder. Suffice to say, all of this indicates, to me at least, that these games are set after Country Returns and Tropical Freeze, where the Kremlin crew is, uncharacteristically, nowhere to be seen around Donkey Kong Island. After persistently pestering his primate adversaries up until Jungle Climber and Barrel Blast, only being trapped at the planet core by an all-powerful banana entity could keep King K. Rool away for those games, while villains like Tiki Tong and Lord Frederick made their mark on DK's turf. Dixie Kong saying she felt like she, Diddy, and DK could finally relax back on their island just before DK left for Ingot Isle might also hint to their turbulent adventure in Tropical Freeze.
K. Rool doesn't really seem to focus too much on DK this time around, which could relate to how his plan in DK Jungle Climber didn't involve the Kongs at all until they showed up to stop him. He might have given up on revenge at some point, and his search for the Banandium root would have been his next big plan to take over the world. Of course, he did wait for DK to appear at the end so he could beat him up.
There's a whole lot more evidence that past DK games happen in the world of Bananza, like Army's fossil referencing Armadillo from DK64, but we went over a lot of the main stuff, so we're gonna move on to the big question. What the heck is going on with Pauline?
In my theories video, I acted pretty confident that they'd explain Pauline in the game. However, about a week before launch, I realized that we were not going to get an answer. In IGN's article, Our Big Bananas Interview with the Developers of Donkey Kong Bananza by Rebekah Valentine, Rebekah asks why Pauline is 13. And after a bit of why she was chosen for the game, director Kazuya Takahashi responded, "As to why 13-year-old in particular was the choice, I think that's something we want players to, in the course of enjoying the game, start to puzzle out, think for themselves." Which is code for, figure it out yourself. And while I do think we'll get an answer eventually, it might be a long time before then, so we're gonna explain our thoughts on what the deal is, because at face value, there is a conundrum. I've made this nifty little chart to help explain the issue. Lady, the girl in the original Donkey Kong arcade game, has been both implied and outright stated to be the same character as Pauline on multiple occasions, especially in this team's last game, Super Mario Odyssey. More on this later. Pauline from Bananza is implied to be the same Pauline from the Mario series, with many parallels between her Odyssey counterpart. But Bananza's Pauline is an entirely different character from Lady, given that the arcade game happened in the past. So either Bananza's Pauline is not Mario's Pauline, or Mario's Pauline is not Lady. And those are the two main ideas. Number 1, Lady Retcon theory. Nintendo is retconning the idea of Lady being Pauline, and likely Mario being Jumpman as well. Or, number 2, relative theory. Bananza's Pauline is not Mario's Pauline, likely a relative such as a niece or cousin. Lady Retcon theory seems to be the most prevalent theory online. This theory ignores the implications that the adult Pauline from the Mario series is the same character as the Lady in the original Donkey Kong game. There are actually a few different branches of Lady Retcon theory, but I'm going to be focusing on what I'm calling same Pauline theory, which merely indicates that the Pauline from the Mario series is the Pauline from Bananza all grown up. Under this theory, Bananza and all the DK games take place years before any of the games where Mario is an adult. This would retcon a lot of things. While it's a popular internet theory, Nintendo has never indicated or entertained the idea that Jumpman and Mario are separate characters. Mario has always been Jumpman, and they've been very consistent with this, but if Pauline is a child in Bananza, then Mario has to be a child too. Therefore, Jumpman could no longer be Mario. Aside from this being generally disappointing, it also contradicts stuff like Mario being mentioned in the Manual of Donkey Kong Country, or any of the Mario cameos in the Donkey Kong Country games. It also means stuff like, if Cranky Kong is still alive by the time of Mario's adventures, he's been really old for over a decade.
Not to mention the allusions to the Donkey Kong Country games taking place concurrently with the Mario games that we often see. If games like Mario Power Tennis happen over a decade after Bananza, why are the critters wearing their old outfits from Donkey Kong 64? How can Wrinkly Kong play Super Mario 64 in Donkey Kong Country 3 when Mario won't have that adventure for at least another 10 years?
Yep, I agree. The sudden disconnect between DK and Mario is one of the most unsatisfying parts about this theory in my own opinion. But the most notable thing about the Lady Retcon theory is how it would destroy the Mario vs. Donkey Kong series.
The Mario vs. Donkey Kong series, as the title suggests, primarily features Mario after he's become the president of a successful toy company, getting into quarrels with the modern Donkey Kong. Pauline was a regular in the Mario vs. Donkey Kong games well before her return to the limelight that began with Super Mario Odyssey. She most commonly appeared as a damsel in distress who gets kidnapped by Donkey Kong for one reason or another, forcing Mario to fight DK to save her. Her first appearance here was in Mario vs. Donkey Kong 2, where we're told that Donkey Kong instantly fell in love with Pauline as soon as he saw her at the opening of Mario's new theme park. Not only does this showcase that Pauline and Donkey Kong hadn't met before this point, which would be in direct conflict with him knowing Donkey Kong Bananza's Pauline at age 13, but DK kidnapping someone because he's in love with her and jealous when he's known her since she was a kid is an incredibly uncomfortable characterization choice to say the least. There have been other allusions to the fact of Pauline being the same character as Lady that would have to be ignored, such as her horn in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe being the level clear theme from the Donkey Kong arcade game. Or an interview for the Donkey Kong GameBoy game, where Miyamoto references Pauline as Mario's girlfriend who got kidnapped, even in the original arcade story where Lady appears. And then we have Super Mario Odyssey itself being blatantly contradicted under this framework. In Pauline's quiz in that game, she mentions that she was captured by Ape a long time ago, and later mentions losing her purse when Mario gets her a new one as a birthday gift. All clearly referencing the time she was kidnapped in the Donkey Kong arcade game and lost her items. Even if you wanted to try writing it all off as something else that happened off-screen to Pauline, the clincher is that if you play the New Donk City Festival with the 8-bit version of Jump Up Superstar, the posters of Pauline around the city are replaced with posters of the lady sprite from the original Donkey Kong arcade game, complete with text on the poster still referring to her as Pauline. It is undoubtedly the case that when the developers of Nintendo EPD8 created Super Mario Odyssey, they intended for Pauline and Lady to be one and the same. So it would be kind of crazy if everything they set up and reaffirmed in their last major game ended up being ignored and overwritten by the next one.
You may point at the Game Boy Donkey Kong game where Mario rescues Pauline from DK. This could help explain Pauline's quiz and lost items quest in Odyssey, right? Nah. The game has either been retconned or it's actually about Jumpman and Lady instead. The DK in this game is Cranky Kong, and DK Jr. is there, clearly still a child, so under Lady Retcon theory, Mario and Pauline cannot be the stars. I think Jumpman and Lady would probably still be named Mario and Pauline, but they would have to be separate characters. Speaking of relatives, that's actually a big piece of evidence for this theory. Pauline mentions her grandma a few times in Bananza. Here's what we know. 1. Pauline is likely being raised by her grandma. 2. Pauline's grandma likes to hear Pauline sing. And 3. Pauline's grandma likes to sing herself. And tangentially related, there's an alt of the lady's dress called the family dress, which could potentially be a dress belonging to the only family we know Pauline has, her grandmother. And I drew this fun idea of what maybe she could look like. Anyway, a lot of people have taken these bits of info as proof that Pauline's grandma is the lady from the arcade game, but it's not really evidence at all. Her grandma sings. But what does that have to do with Lady? Aside from the scrapped DK music game for the NES and a licensed Western coloring book that probably was not even on Nintendo's radar, there's no official evidence that Lady was ever a singer, and I'm not sure why Nintendo would expect us to assume that she was. If Lady is separate from Pauline, then singing has no relevance. While the family dress does imply a familial connection, I think it's too vague to say that that means that Grandma is Lady. And I'd argue that the dress being accompanied by Pauline's normal hairstyle, instead of the poofy blonde style from the original arcade art used in the other Lady dresses, makes it genuinely impossible to know if Lady is the grandma. She could be, she could not. The name of the family dress in Japanese is the legacy dress, which might mean there isn't a familial connection at all, just that the dress has a legacy. And the color palette could also be based on the Famicom controller colors. And Famicom is short for family computer, so family dress would make a lot of sense. I've also seen theories that it's based on olive oil from Popeye, so who the heck knows? Does this matter? Not really. Whether or not Lady is Pauline's grandmother would not change the retcons caused by this theory. I've just noticed a lot of people claiming that it's clearly implied that her grandma is Lady when, in my opinion, there's no evidence. Now, why am I entertaining Lady retcon theory if I'm pointing out all the flaws with it? It's because even though this outcome is not ideal, I think it's entirely possible. Nintendo clearly cares about the lore of these games, but if they felt like making retcons would be better for their vision, then they might do that. It's worth noting that this is the first game, to my knowledge, where Jumpman is directly referenced in the Japanese text of a game. I think it would be really terrible if this theory ended up being true. Lots of stuff would get retconned and changed, plot holes and issues would arise, but continuity would march on regardless, and I am kind of warming up to it ever since I made this Jumpman art.
Plus, this theory does actually solve a supposed plot hole introduced 20 years ago with Yoshi's Island DS. If Lady and Pauline, and therefore Mario and Jumpman, were separate characters, Mario and DK could reasonably be babies around the same time, as that game seems to show. But then that still raises more questions, like how Donkey Kong Jr. could possibly still be a child alongside an adult Mario in the Game & Watch Gallery games. While I think it's very possible, I will elect to assume that there hasn't been a retcon until we have hard evidence otherwise. The developers of this game are intentionally creating a mystery here, one way or another, and I think it's too early to speak in definitive terms. We'll have to just wait and see where they take things with these characters from here, and how things adapt, if at all, to suit any changes.
Relative theory ignores the implications that Bananza's Pauline is the same one from the Mario series. The Mario series Pauline is still Lady from the arcade game, but Bananza's is an original character. To simplify things, from this point forward, we will be referring to the Mario series Pauline as Mayor, and Bananza's Pauline by the fan-favorite nickname Smalline. In my theories video, I claimed that Mayor probably isn't Smalline's mother due to her age, but we don't know how old Mayor is in the Mario games, so theoretically she could indeed have a fairly aged child in the modern Mario games. However,
based on Pauline being Mario's ex-girlfriend and Mario being in his mid-20s in the Donkey Kong arcade game according to Miyamoto, it's pretty unlikely she could have a 13-year-old girl by this point. Even if there was an age gap between Pauline and Mario when they were dating, I certainly don't think it's feasible that Pauline has a young daughter off-screen throughout all of these games.
I do think that Mayor and Smalline are related in some way. The family dress and very similar appearance definitely implies some connection. My personal belief is that Mayor could be the aunt or cousin of Smalline. Here's the hypothetical. They may not really interact all that much, but perhaps they're both close with the grandma that is mentioned in Bananza. Grandma may have been an inspiration to them, leading to them both becoming singers. And if Grandma's name is also Pauline, then that would explain why they've got the same name. Mayor and Smalline were both named after Grandma Pauline. All of this would give Grandma significance in a way that doesn't require her to have been the lady in the arcade game. Mayor would still be Lady. So, the major flaw with relative theory is that it goes against the implication from Bananza that Smalline is Mayor when she was younger. There are a lot of similarities between the two characters, and the diva dress being very similar to Mayor's fit in Odyssey definitely raises an eyebrow. This is partly why I think that Lady Retcon theory is possible, but I also don't think the implication that Mayor and Smalline are the same character is necessarily definitive. It's worth noting that modern DK is often associated with elements and imagery of the arcade game. For example, Bananza, and other recent games like Mario Kart World. And with DK's recent design update, he's ended up resembling the classic DK more than ever before. The similarities between Paulines may mirror this situation. While she is a separate character, her relevance leads to association with the diva imagery established by Odyssey. So even though it's risky, I'm choosing to believe in relative theory because it just works so much better. Once again, I acknowledge that this theory could end up being proved wrong, but it's genuinely the least contradictory theory that exists, so I'm following it.
The relative theory patches up all of the holes that the Lady Retcon theory creates. If they're different Paulines, there's no more weirdness with DK and Pauline meeting each other for the first time twice, or the Mario vs. Donkey Kong games in general. If they're different Paulines, the Donkey Kong Country games can still happen at the same time as Mario's adventures. And if they're different Paulines, Mayor Pauline can still be the lady who was kidnapped in the arcade game, just like Super Mario Odyssey implies.
Alright, now I want to pose a question for you to consider, because it is that question that ultimately led to my belief in this theory. Ahem. How did Voidco know to kidnap Pauline? The conclusion I speculated was that this is the wrong Pauline. An alternative form of relative theory is wrong Pauline theory. It poses a logical explanation for why they'd have two Paulines. The idea is that Void Kong decided to kidnap Mayor Pauline. He knew about her and her singing because she is a celebrity, and when they went to New Donk City to capture her, they got Smalline, the wrong Pauline.
Now, we have heard a lot of flawed arguments out there that either try to insist upon the retcon theory or explain away the holes in it. Here, we'd like to tackle some of these arguments and where they fall apart.
In Odyssey, Mayor Pauline says she was kidnapped by an ape. But what if that ape wasn't Donkey Kong, but actually Void Kong or Grumpy Kong?
Firstly, Void Kong isn't an ape. He's probably a macaque monkey. I mean, look at that tail! Talk about stylish. While Grumpy Kong certainly is an ape, If we turn to the original Japanese text for this, it's actually specified that Pauline was kidnapped by a gorilla, not just any old ape. Looks like you're off the hook too, Grumpy.
So Mayor Pauline says she was kidnapped by a gorilla, but she was probably just referring to the Mario vs. Donkey Kong games, not the arcade game. She was kidnapped in some of those too.
While yes, Pauline was also kidnapped by an ape in the Mario vs. Donkey Kong games, that wouldn't account for her lost items, which don't appear in those games, being mentioned in Odyssey, nor the posters of her sprite from the arcade game that appeared during the festival, as we mentioned earlier. Not to mention, the whole New Donk City Festival itself is essentially a reenactment of the Donkey Kong arcade game. So why would Pauline put all this together like that for Mario if they didn't have that shared history?
I also heavily doubt that the events of March of the Minis were traumatic for her. Maybe Miniland Mayhem, but her and DK were already friends, so I doubt she felt she was in any danger, and it certainly didn't help make her who she is today, like she claims.
Donkey Kong, how sweet.
After the Great Harmonial Challenge, Pauline comes up with the melody for 25 meters, which is used in Jump Up Superstar and Break Free Lead the Way. This clearly means that Smalline and Mayor Pauline are the same person.
So the post-game focuses on Pauline writing a new song to sing at New Donk City Hall. In the end, she does indeed come up with the repeating background melody used in the DK arcade game, here. I do find it suspect though, considering that the arcade game has already existed in-universe for a long time. But regardless of that, it is true that this melody is present in Jump Up Superstar, and Break Free Lead the Way. However, I find it incredibly unlikely that either of those were the songs that she wrote, because they're both love songs about Mario and his adventures, so that doesn't really make much sense. Here are the options that do make sense to me. 1. This is an original song that we have not heard before, or 2. It's Breaking Through Heart of Gold, the credit song for Bananza. It may not be as prominent as its use in the Odyssey songs, but 25 meters is still in there. And while its lack of prominence makes the post-game plot a little less satisfying, I think this is indeed what they were implying. The artwork that shows off her performance at City Hall is the same art that is used on the disc for the song. Furthermore, the bonus disc you get from the Great Harmonial Challenge is the karaoke version of the song. While it plays in the credits before any of this, Pauline isn't actually singing it there in real time. I think Pauline took the song she developed over the course of her adventure,
When the world felt so cruel and bleak,
and ended up creating the final version to sing at City Hall.
this strange world, it's so fast and deep.
The verse she sings to break DK free on the Forbidden Layer does not match the lyrics of any of the final verses, so that verse being from before the song was finished makes a lot of sense to me. Oh right, the point I was making is that Pauline probably isn't singing either of the Odyssey songs at this concert, and the 25 meters melody already existed, so her coming up with it here doesn't necessarily mean anything. Okay, I gotta add one more bit about relative theory. I wasn't gonna address this originally, but I'm seeing more and more people spreading this idea around, so I better bring it up. One of the more popular theories right now is that Smalline's grandma is Mayor Pauline, and that Bananza takes place far in the future. While there are a few little things that could support this, I think it's utterly nonsensical and I refuse to humor it. I think the biggest issue for me is not how many issues it creates, but rather how many issues it creates for a completely unsatisfying reason. Retcon theory creates a lot of problems, but it's at least for a thematic reason. There is logic behind the retcons. There is no logic behind Grandma being Mayor Pauline. I don't get why Nintendo would have any reason to do that. There's so much more wrong with it, but I'm gonna move on now. You can believe in it, but hey, I absolutely will not. To supplement wrong Pauline theory, I wanted to share my very own speculative Bananza timeline of events. We're never told exactly what happens, but they definitely give you enough information to come up with your own ideas, so here's a little bit of mine. Sometime after DK Jungle Climber, K. Rool and some of his Kremlin crew head underground and search for the Banandium root. When they get to the sinkhole on the Forbidden Layer, the Banandium root responds to K. Rool's evil ambitions and seals him, plugging the sinkhole. An ambitious monkey named Voidkong starts a mining operation named Voidco. While he struggles at first, he eventually discovers tips of the Banandium root. He uses the gold from the root to get rich and enhance his company. Void follows the root underground, potentially meeting people who explain the legend of the wish-granting Banandium root. He goes all the way down to the Forbidden Layer, a dead end where he discovers the Banandium root. However, he cannot find a way to activate the root. Perhaps they do a bit of R&D to try to figure it out, to no avail. Poppy Kong uses her intel gathering skills to determine what is necessary to awaken the root. There's a lot of stuff on the Forbidden Layer that potentially hints at the solution, but I'll skip that for this video. I may go more in-depth on that another time. Anyway, Poppy determines that they need a big, strong amplifier and a singer with perfect pitch. Knowing now what they need, the pay dirt pile driver is made. It's a giant mining machine, but its true purpose is to amplify song to wake the root. When searching for a singer with perfect pitch, Void brings up Mayor Pauline, who he'd know about both because of Ingot Isle's relationship with New Donk and also because his company building was likely built there. Based on the description given, they unknowingly end up with the wrong Pauline, but since perfect pitch runs in the family, they still have what they need and they never even become aware of their mistake. To get her to the core without the risk of her escaping, Void uses his all-mind remote to turn her to stone. But Pauline's power is too strong, and despite being turned into a rock, she can still move, which she uses to her advantage to escape. At the end of the game, DK is completely immobile, as were the Fractones trapped on the junction layer, so I guess Pauline is just really overpowered. With Pauline having run away, Void shifts his focus onto merely getting the pay dirt pile driver to the planet core. Grumpy's corporate soldiers can capture her and bring her to them. But before his goons can get her, DK gets her instead, and his beat helps her break free. The rest of the game happens as seen in the game. Void's paranoia increases as he tries to block off as much of the underground world as he can. Finally, Void gets to the core, outsmarts Pauline, and forces her to sing Waking the Banandium Root. Unfortunately for him, the root was keeping a greater evil at bay, and his plans are ruined. That paranoid, greedy punk got served. But yeah, that's the speculative headcanon I have to explain wrong Pauline theory. If you'd like to know my full in-depth timeline with what I use as evidence, I'd be happy to share in the future. I love Voidkong. On the 20th of August, Nintendo Dreamweb released an interview with the developers of Bananza, and it has a lot of fun stuff in it. It's in Japanese, but thanks to Google Translate, we can get a good gist of what it said. At one point, the interviewer asks whether Pauline is the same person as previous games, and Takahashi says, "Although the story makes it clear to some extent, I'll leave the details to your imagination." And then we got another interview later on where they once again said they want it to be a mystery. So the official answer on what Pauline's deal is still unknown. It's up to interpretation, at least for now. I do not care what theory you decide to believe, whether it be that they're retconning the past for thematic cohesion, creating a brand new character, or some other third thing. Just please stop claiming that retcons fix the timeline. Aside from Baby DK, there's nothing wrong with the timeline. Some theories will cause plot holes, some theories will require retcons, just please acknowledge that they do. Even though relative theory / wrong Pauline theory is ideal to me, it's not perfect, and I cannot say with confidence that it will be the proper outcome. Look at all the evidence. Ask yourself questions. Try to find answers to those questions, and have fun theorizing, cause golly, Bananza has been so much fun to theorize about. That's about all I had to say. Big thank you to Sean for providing most of the footage for this video, as well as helping out with many of the segments.
And thank you for having me on! You guys at home can check out my YouTube channel, or talk about your own theories, over on Project Marioverse.
One last thing. Every single Pauline theory I proposed in my original video turned out to be impossible. Except for relative theory, of course. However, the Banandium root is still at the core and is still able to grant wishes. So,
here's how wish revisionism theory could still work.